This is Dr. Ethan Cross, broadcasting from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. What I'm about to share will fundamentally challenge your understanding of our cosmic neighborhood and the fragile security we've taken for granted. 3 weeks ago, our automated detection arrays picked up something moving through the asteroid belt that defies every classification protocol we've developed over decades of space observation. The object registered on our instruments as a routine celestial body at first glance, but subsequent analysis revealed behavioral patterns that have left our entire scientific community struggling for explanations. The anomaly measures approximately 2.1 kilometers in diameter, placing it in the category of potentially hazardous objects that we monitor with extreme vigilance. However, unlike the thousands of asteroids we track annually, this particular specimen exhibits velocity changes that contradict our understanding of natural orbital mechanics. Standard asteroids follow predictable trajectories governed by gravitational influences from nearby celestial bodies, but this object has demonstrated course corrections that suggest either an internal propulsion system or gravitational forces we cannot identify. The thermal signatures emanating from its core cycle through temperature variations every 17 hours, creating heat patterns that resemble mechanical operations rather than passive solar radiation absorption. Our global network of observatories has been tracking the object continuously since its initial detection, yet each facility reports slightly different spectral analyses and behavioral observations. The Arecibo Replacement Facility in Puerto Rico describes a metallic composition with unusual reflectivity properties, while the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope Array detects organic compounds that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. These contradictory readings have created heated debates within the astronomical community about the object's true nature and origin. Some researchers argue that equipment malfunctions or atmospheric interference explains the discrepancies, but the consistency of anomalous data across multiple independent systems suggests something far more significant. The object's trajectory calculations place it on a collision course with Earth, though the margin of error remains substantial due to its unpredictable velocity changes. Current projections indicate a potential impact window spanning 14 to 18 days from today, but gravitational influences from Jupiter and our own moon could still deflect it harmlessly into deep space. The uncertainty has prevented official agencies from declaring a planetary emergency, leaving the scientific community in the uncomfortable position of monitoring a potential extinction event without sufficient data to confirm its inevitability. This ambiguity has created a perfect storm of speculation and fear that spreads through social media faster than our instruments can provide definitive answers. History teaches us to fear cosmic visitors of this magnitude with justified terror. 66 million years ago, an asteroid measuring approximately 10 kilometers in diameter struck the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of 10 billion atomic bombs, creating the Chicxulub crater that spans 150 kilometers across. The impact vaporized billions of tons of rock and sulfur, hurling debris into the stratosphere and creating a global winter that lasted for years. The resulting climate catastrophe extinguished 75% of all species on Earth, including the mighty dinosaurs that had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for over 160 million years. The event marked the end of the Cretaceous period and fundamentally altered the course of evolutionary history. The Tunguska event of 1908 demonstrates how even smaller cosmic visitors can unleash regional devastation beyond human comprehension. An object estimated at only 60 meters across exploded in the atmosphere above Siberia with the force of 15 megatons, flattening over 2,000 square kilometers of forest in a radial pattern that remained visible for decades. The airburst created seismic waves detected across Europe and generated atmospheric pressure changes measured around the globe. Had Tunguska occurred over a populated area, the death toll would have numbered in the millions. Yet this object was less than 3% the size of our current visitor. But cosmic catastrophes extend far beyond these recent events in Earth's violent past. The Vredefort impact structure in South Africa, formed 2 billion years ago, created a crater 300 kilometers in diameter that fundamentally altered the geology of an entire continent. The impact energy released was equivalent to firing every nuclear weapon ever built simultaneously, several thousand times over. The shockwaves liquefied bedrock for hundreds of kilometers, creating mineral formations that geologists still study today as evidence of the unimaginable forces involved in cosmic collisions. Social media platforms have become breeding grounds for increasingly elaborate theories about our mysterious visitor's true nature. Hashtags like alien invasion and fake asteroid accumulate millions of posts hourly, spreading speculation that government agencies are concealing evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Anonymous accounts claim the object exhibits controlled flight characteristics that prove artificial intelligence rather than natural gravitational drift. Videos allegedly showing military aircraft conducting surveillance flights near major observatories circulate faster than official debunking attempts can contain them, fueling public paranoia that grows more intense with each passing hour. Amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes have joined the global observation effort, posting time-lapse photography and spectral analysis attempts across internet forums dedicated to space monitoring. Their images reveal surface features that appear to shift between observation sessions, creating controversy about whether these changes represent actual physical alterations or simply variations in lighting conditions and atmospheric interference. Professional astronomers dismiss most amateur observations as equipment limitations or operator error, but the sheer volume of consistent anomalous reports has forced some experts to acknowledge that conventional explanations may prove insufficient. The conspiracy theories aren't entirely unfounded in their skepticism of official transparency. Government space agencies worldwide have implemented unusual communications protocols that restrict information sharing in ways typically reserved for national security emergencies. Military installations near major observatories have quietly increased their security presence, while classified briefings for senior leadership occur daily rather than following normal monthly schedules. These behavioral changes, though officially explained as routine precautionary measures, have only amplified public suspicions that crucial information is being withheld from civilian populations. Our current visitor exhibits characteristics that challenge fundamental assumptions about asteroid composition and behavior. The thermal cycling suggests internal heat generation that exceeds what radioactive decay could produce, while spectral analysis reveals surface materials that shift between metallic and organic signatures depending on observation angle and wavelength. Most disturbing, the object's rotation appears to follow patterns that suggest deliberate orientation changes rather than the chaotic tumbling typical of natural space debris. The mathematics of potential impact energy calculations paint a terrifying picture of global consequences. If our visitor maintains its current mass and velocity estimates, the kinetic energy released upon impact would exceed the Chicxulub event by a factor of at least 3, possibly as much as 8. depending on final approach speed. Such an impact would create atmospheric disruption lasting decades rather than years, potentially reducing global temperatures below the threshold necessary for agricultural survival. The resulting crater would span hundreds of kilometers, while seismic effects could trigger simultaneous volcanic activity across multiple continents. Yet uncertainty remains our most dangerous enemy in these critical weeks ahead. The object's unpredictable behavior makes accurate trajectory modeling nearly impossible, leaving evacuation planners without reliable impact zones to target for population displacement. Coastal regions face potential tsunami devastation if the object strikes oceanic areas, while inland populations could experience direct impact effects or long-term climate disruption depending on the strike location. This uncertainty has paralyzed decision-making processes at every governmental level, as leaders struggle to balance public safety against the economic catastrophe of unnecessary mass evacuations. Tomorrow's broadcast will examine the latest observational data and trajectory refinements as our mysterious visitor continues its approach toward Earth. The next 24 hours may finally provide the definitive answers we desperately need about whether we face natural disaster, something far stranger, or perhaps nothing at all. Until then, look up at the night sky with new awareness that somewhere among those distant stars, an object of unknown origin carries the potential to rewrite human civilization's future in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. This has been Dr. Ethan Cross, documenting humanity's encounter with cosmic uncertainty during what may prove to be our species' most crucial weeks. Dr. Ethan Cross returning with critical updates from the International Asteroid Monitoring Consortium. The uncertainty that plagued our previous broadcast has crystallized into mathematical certainty that will reshape how we understand our planet's vulnerability to cosmic forces. Over the past 72 hours, supercomputer simulations running continuously at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the European Space Agency's Mission Control, and the Russian Academy of Sciences have converged on identical conclusions. The object we've designated KX-47 maintains a trajectory that places Earth impact probability at 99.3%, with the remaining uncertainty attributed solely to potential gravitational perturbations during its final approach phase. Our refined observations have confirmed KX-47 as a legitimate asteroid measuring 2.3 kilometers at its widest diameter, substantially larger than initial estimates suggested. Mass calculations based on gravitational influence measurements place its total weight at approximately 15 billion tons, composed primarily of metallic elements with unusual density characteristics that exceed typical iron-nickel compositions found in most space debris. The velocity measurements show continued acceleration beyond what gravitational attraction from our solar system's major bodies should produce, suggesting either an extremely dense core generating unexpected gravitational effects or propulsion mechanisms that challenge our understanding of natural celestial mechanics. The trajectory analysis reveals KX-47 will bypass our moon entirely, eliminating any possibility of gravitational deflection from our planet's most reliable cosmic guardian. For over 4 billion years, Luna has served as Earth's silent protector, absorbing countless impacts that would have fundamentally altered our world's evolutionary timeline. The moon's scarred surface tells a story of sacrifice written in crater formations that span from microscopic pits to massive impact basins hundreds of kilometers across. Each lunar scar represents a potential extinction event, deflected away from our fragile biosphere through the moon's gravitational influence and physical interception. Mare Orientale stands as perhaps the most spectacular example of our moon's protective sacrifice, formed 3.8 billion years ago when an asteroid roughly half the size of KX-47 struck Luna's western limb. The impact created concentric mountain rings extending 930 kilometers from ground zero, with peak heights reaching 6 kilometers above the surrounding terrain. The energy released during Mare Orientale's formation exceeded every nuclear weapon ever detonated by humanity combined. Yet the moon absorbed this cosmic violence without complaint, preserving Earth from devastation that would have sterilized our planet's surface completely. The South Pole Aitken Basin represents Luna's largest and oldest major impact structure, spanning over 2,500 kilometers in diameter and penetrating 13 kilometers deep into the lunar crust. This ancient wound was carved by an object estimated at 200 kilometers across, striking with sufficient force to excavate material from the moon's lower crust and possibly its upper mantle. Had such a projectile found Earth instead of Luna, the impact would have created a crater spanning half of North America, while ejecting debris completely beyond our planet's gravitational influence, potentially stripping away our entire atmosphere in the process. Lunar crater counting studies reveal that our moon intercepts asteroids and comets at a rate exceeding one major impact per million years, with smaller objects striking monthly or even weekly depending on size classifications. The lunar far side, permanently hidden from Earth's view, bears the heaviest concentration of impact scars because it faces the direction of our solar system's motion through space, intercepting debris that would otherwise continue toward our planet. Without Luna's gravitational shepherding and physical blocking, Earth would have experienced perhaps 100 times more impact events throughout its geological history. KX-47's approach vector completely circumvents our lunar shield, following a trajectory that brings it directly toward Earth without passing through the gravitational influence zones where Luna might deflect or capture it. Current calculations place the most probable impact zone in the central Pacific Ocean, approximately 1,200 kilometers southwest of the Hawaiian Islands. Ocean impacts generate consequences fundamentally different from terrestrial strikes, as the displaced water becomes a weapon of unimaginable destructive potential that can devastate coastlines thousands of kilometers from ground zero. The energy calculations for KX-47's potential impact approach levels that dwarf historical comparison events by factors that challenge human comprehension. The kinetic energy release will approximate 2.8 times 10 to the 23rd power joules, equivalent to detonating every nuclear weapon currently stored in global arsenals simultaneously, repeated several thousand times over. This energy concentration will vaporize millions of tons of seawater instantaneously, creating a cavitation bubble that penetrates the ocean floor and fractures underlying tectonic structures with seismic consequences, extending far beyond the immediate impact zone. Tsunami propagation models suggest the initial water displacement will generate wave heights exceeding 800 meters at the impact epicenter, racing outward at velocities approaching 700 kilometers per hour. These mega tsunamis will maintain lethal heights of 200 to 300 meters when they reach populated coastlines, overwhelming any conceivable defensive barriers or evacuation procedures. The Pacific Ring of Fire, that chain of volcanic activity encircling our ocean's perimeter, faces activation as seismic shock waves trigger sympathetic eruptions across multiple continental boundaries simultaneously. But the immediate tsunami represents only the beginning of KX-47's atmospheric consequences. The impact will eject an estimated 150 billion tons of vaporized rock and seawater into the stratosphere, creating a debris cloud that will circle Earth within 6 hours and achieve global saturation within 18 hours of impact. This particulate matter will block solar radiation with efficiency approaching 85%, triggering immediate global temperature drops that could persist for 18 to 36 months, depending on atmospheric circulation patterns and debris settling rates. Historical precedent for such atmospheric disruption exists in the geological record, most notably during the Permian-Triassic extinction event 252 million years ago. Massive volcanic activity in Siberia released enormous quantities of ash and toxic gases into Earth's atmosphere, creating conditions similar to what KX-47's impact will generate through debris injection. The resulting climate catastrophe eliminated 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates, requiring over 10 million years for biodiversity levels to recover to pre-extinction baselines. Amateur astronomers worldwide have documented KX-47's approach with increasingly sophisticated observations that reveal surface details invisible to casual observation. Time-lapse photography shows rotation patterns that appear deliberately controlled rather than the chaotic tumbling typical of natural space debris. Surface features seem to reconfigure between observation sessions, creating geometric patterns that shift in ways suggesting active mechanical processes rather than passive erosion or thermal expansion effects. Professional astronomers publicly dismiss these observations as optical illusions or equipment artifacts, but private communications reveal growing concern about KX-47's unnatural characteristics. The thermal cycling patterns have intensified as KX-47 approaches the inner solar system, with internal temperature readings now reaching 900 degrees Celsius during peak emission phases. Solar heating cannot account for such elevated temperatures at the object's current distance from our Sun, suggesting either radioactive decay from elements not typically found in asteroid compositions or active heat generation from unknown internal processes. Spectral analysis continues revealing isotopic signatures that contradict standard models of solar system formation and asteroid belt evolution. Social media platforms have become digital battlegrounds where conspiracy theories clash with official scientific explanations in increasingly hostile exchanges. Videos claiming to show military aircraft conducting reconnaissance flights near KX-47 proliferate faster than debunking efforts can contain them, while amateur radio operators report detecting structured electromagnetic transmissions from the object's vicinity. Government space agencies maintain that all observations can be explained through conventional physics, but their increasingly aggressive information control measures only amplify public suspicions about concealed evidence of extraterrestrial contact. The economic implications of potential impact have triggered unprecedented financial instability as markets struggle to price assets in a world facing possible civilization-ending catastrophe. Coastal real estate values have collapsed completely, while inland agricultural properties experience speculative bubbles as investors anticipate post-impact resource scarcity. Transportation stocks fluctuate wildly as evacuation demands strain global logistics capabilities beyond their design limitations, creating shortages of fuel, vehicles, and infrastructure capacity needed for population displacement on continental scales. Government emergency management agencies face impossible logistical challenges in preparing for impact scenarios that exceed every disaster response protocol ever developed. Evacuating 200 million Pacific Rim residents requires transportation and housing resources that simply do not exist, while maintaining social order during such massive population displacement approaches impossibility. The psychological stress of impending catastrophe has already triggered increased suicide rates, domestic violence incidents, and mental health crises that overwhelm support systems designed for normal emergency situations. Tomorrow's broadcast will examine the final approach calculations and the agonizing decisions facing world leaders as they choose between attempting military intervention against KX-47 or allowing it to complete its cosmic journey unimpeded. The mathematics of deflection versus fragmentation risk will determine whether humanity faces one controlled catastrophe or multiple chaotic disasters scattered across our planet's surface. This is Dr. Ethan Cross, documenting our species' final days of cosmic innocence as we approach a threshold that will forever separate the world we have known from whatever emerges in its aftermath. Dr. Ethan Cross, broadcasting from the Global Crisis Coordination Center as humanity confronts the most consequential decision in our species' existence. KX-47 has crossed the asteroid belt boundary and entered the inner solar system with a velocity that defies every gravitational model we possess. The object now travels at 34.7 kilometers per second, accelerating beyond what natural celestial mechanics should allow. At current trajectory and speed, impact with Earth will occur in exactly 6 days, 14 hours, and 27 minutes. The window for uncertainty has closed permanently, leaving us face to face with mathematical inevitability that cannot be wished away or rationalized into comfortable denial. The International Space Defense Council convened an emergency session for 96 consecutive hours, analyzing every conceivable option for altering KX-47's trajectory before impact. Nuclear intercept scenarios dominated the discussions, with proposals ranging from single large warhead deployment to coordinated multiple missile strikes designed to fragment or deflect the incoming asteroid. Marcus Hale from NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office presented the grim mathematics that have guided our final decision. The largest nuclear device ever detonated by humanity, the Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba, yielding 57 megatons, would barely chip KX-47's surface, given its estimated mass and structural density. Even if we could deliver multiple nuclear warheads simultaneously to the asteroid's core, the explosion would likely shatter KX-47 into hundreds of smaller fragments, each carrying sufficient mass to cause regional devastation across multiple continents. The Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet provides a terrifying preview of fragmentation consequences when it broke apart before impacting Jupiter in 1994. The comet split into 21 distinct pieces, each striking the gas giant with explosive force equivalent to millions of nuclear weapons. Had such fragmentation occurred during Earth approach, our planet would have faced a shotgun blast of destruction that could have sterilized entire hemispheres rather than concentrating damage in a single impact zone. The decision reached by world leaders represents perhaps the most sobering moment in human history. We will not attempt to intercept or deflect KX-47. The risks of transforming one controlled impact into dozens of chaotic strikes across populated continents outweigh any potential benefits of intervention. Humanity will allow this mountain of stone and metal to complete its 4.6 billion year journey from the outer solar system to our doorstep, accepting the consequences of a single catastrophic impact rather than gambling with multiple extinction-level events scattered randomly across Earth's surface. Current trajectory refinements place KX-47's impact point in the Pacific Ocean, 1,247 kilometers southwest of Honolulu, Hawaii. The impact angle will approach 37 degrees from horizontal, striking at 38.2 kilometers per second after final atmospheric acceleration. Ocean impacts offer certain advantages over terrestrial strikes, as water absorbs approximately 40% of kinetic energy through vaporization and displacement, reducing immediate crater formation and debris ejection compared to solid ground collisions. However, this absorbed energy doesn't disappear, but transforms into the most powerful tsunami in Earth's geological history. Seismic modeling predicts the impact will register magnitude 11.2 on the Richter scale, a measurement category that doesn't officially exist because no natural earthquake has ever approached such intensity. The seismic waves will propagate through Earth's crust at 8.2 kilometers per second, circling our planet 17 times before dissipating to background levels. Every major fault line on Earth will experience sympathetic activation as the shock wave passes, potentially triggering simultaneous ruptures along the San Andreas, New Madrid, Cascadia, and North Anatolian fault systems within hours of primary impact. The Pacific Ring of Fire faces unprecedented activation as seismic energy cascades through tectonic plate boundaries that have remained relatively stable for centuries. Mount Fuji, Krakatoa, Mount Rainier, and dozens of other volcanic systems could experience simultaneous eruptions as magma chambers respond to the massive pressure waves generated by KX-47's impact. Historical precedent exists for such cascading volcanic activity, most notably during the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which created the year without a summer. In 1816, through atmospheric ash injection that caused crop failures and famine across Europe and North America. Tsunami propagation calculations reveal wave heights that challenge human comprehension and dwarf every historical comparison. The initial water displacement will create waves exceeding 800 meters in height at ground zero, racing outward at velocities approaching the speed of commercial jet aircraft. These mega tsunamis will maintain lethal heights of 200 to 300 meters when they reach populated coastlines, moving too rapidly for traditional evacuation procedures to provide adequate escape time. Japan's sophisticated early warning systems, which typically provide 12 hours notice for Pacific origin tsunamis, will offer less than 7 hours for waves traveling at such unprecedented velocities. Coastal evacuation orders have commenced across 17 Pacific Rim nations, affecting an estimated 215 million people who must relocate inland beyond tsunami reach zones within the next 168 hours. The logistics strain human organizational capacity beyond any conceivable breaking point. California alone must move 27 million residents away from coastal areas using transportation infrastructure designed for normal traffic flow rather than continental-scale population displacement. Highway systems become parking lots when entire metropolitan regions attempt simultaneous exodus, while rail networks and airports face demand levels that exceed their capacity by factors of 10 or more. Yet coastal populations represent only the beginning of KX-47's human impact calculations. The atmospheric debris cloud will inject approximately 150 billion tons of vaporized material into the stratosphere, blocking solar radiation for an estimated 18 to 36 months, depending on particle size distribution and atmospheric circulation patterns. Global temperatures will plummet below freezing across all latitudes, triggering immediate agricultural collapse and ecosystem shutdown that could reduce Earth's human carrying capacity to pre-industrial levels. Current global food reserves might sustain existing population levels for approximately 4 months under optimal distribution scenarios, an impossibility given the chaos and infrastructure damage following impact. Modern civilization cannot survive prolonged atmospheric disruption on the scale that KX-47 will generate. The last ice age was triggered by global temperature drops, half the magnitude of what our computer models predict for post-impact conditions. Agricultural systems optimized for current climate zones will fail completely as growing seasons disappear and soil temperatures drop below the threshold necessary for seed germination. Livestock mortality will approach 100% as feed crops die and pasture lands freeze solid, eliminating protein sources for billions of people within the first year following impact. The electromagnetic characteristics of KX-47 have intensified dramatically as it approaches Earth's gravitational influence zone. Radio telescopes worldwide detect structured emissions from the asteroid's vicinity that display patterns suggesting organized information rather than random cosmic background radiation. Amateur radio operators have documented transmissions that appear to contain mathematical sequences and frequency modulations that imply intentional communication attempts rather than natural electromagnetic phenomena. Cryptographers from the National Security Agency and Government Communications Headquarters have analyzed these signals without reaching definitive conclusions about their origin or meaning. Surface imaging from the Hubble Space Telescope and James Webb Observatory reveals details that challenge fundamental assumptions about natural asteroid formation and composition. KX-47's exterior displays parallel ridges running along its equatorial region, with spacing intervals that follow mathematical progressions, while circular depressions cluster near what appears to be the object's rotational poles in patterns too organized for random impact scarring. These features shift and reconfigure between observation sessions in ways that suggest active surface modification rather than passive erosion or thermal expansion effects. The conspiracy theories have evolved beyond amateur speculation into organized resistance movements demanding government disclosure of classified information about KX-47's artificial origins. Protests outside major observatories and space facilities have turned violent as groups claiming official knowledge of extraterrestrial contact clash with security forces attempting to maintain operational secrecy. Their demands for full transparency reflect growing public skepticism about official explanations that increasingly strain credibility as more anomalous evidence accumulates through independent observation networks. Several prominent astronomers have privately expressed doubts about KX-47's natural formation, though professional pressure prevents public acknowledgement of these concerns. Dr. Sophia Park from the California Institute of Technology confided during encrypted communications that 40 years of asteroid research has never produced an object displaying such systematic deviation from expected characteristics. The thermal emissions, electromagnetic field generation, and structural modifications all suggest artificial construction designed to mimic natural space debris while concealing technological capabilities beyond current human understanding. Global stock markets have ceased meaningful operation as trading volumes overwhelm all computer systems designed to handle normal transaction loads. Currency values fluctuate wildly as governments print unlimited quantities of money to fund emergency evacuations and military preparations for post-impact scenarios. The concept of long-term economic planning has become meaningless when human civilization itself faces potential extinction within the current week. Coastal real estate holds zero value, while inland agricultural properties command prices that reflect their potential role as survival centers in a post-impact world. This is Dr. Ethan Cross, chronicling our species' final hours before the universe reminds us of our true place in the vast indifference of space. Dr. Ethan Cross, broadcasting from the Mountain Emergency Facility as I document the most catastrophic event in recorded human history. KX-47 struck the Pacific Ocean, transforming our planet from a place of relative cosmic security into something unrecognizable and terrifying. What I must report represents the moment when human civilization crossed an irreversible threshold into an age of consequences that will echo through geological time. The impact occurred precisely where our calculations predicted, 1,247 kilometers southwest of Honolulu, with 15 billion tons of cosmic debris punching through Earth's atmosphere like a bullet through tissue paper. The object maintained structural integrity despite atmospheric compression, heating that reached 12,000 degrees Celsius, striking the ocean surface at 38.2 kilometers per second. In the first millisecond, 500 cubic kilometers of seawater transformed into superheated plasma, creating a cavitation bubble 8 kilometers deep and 22 kilometers across that penetrated the ocean floor and fractured underlying basalt formations. Our seismic monitoring stations registered the impact as magnitude 11.7, significantly higher than our most pessimistic projections. Dr. Daniel Stroud from the United States Geological Survey transmitted his final readings before communication towers along the Pacific coastline succumbed to the approaching devastation. The seismic waves are propagating through Earth's crust at velocities exceeding 8.5 kilometers per second, and in approximately 37 minutes, every earthquake detection system on our planet will register KX-47's signature simultaneously as the shock wave completes its initial circumnavigation of our world. But the seismic destruction pales before the hydrological catastrophe now bearing down on Pacific coastlines with the inevitability of physics itself. The water displacement exceeded our most catastrophic calculations by margins that challenge comprehension. The initial tsunami wave heights measure 1,340 meters at the impact epicenter, nearly a mile-high wall of water racing toward populated shores at supersonic speeds. These waves maintain their devastating potential across distances that mock every historical comparison, approaching landfall with heights that will overtop the tallest buildings in major metropolitan areas. Dr. Owen Cade from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii transmitted his observatory's final measurements 12 minutes ago before the facility was evacuated. Wavefront approaching Oahu at 890 kilometers per hour, height maintaining 380 meters despite bathymetric energy dissipation expected from underwater ridge interactions. Estimated arrival at Honolulu Harbor in 7 minutes. The Hawaiian Islands, home to 1.4 million people, will experience complete oceanic inundation within the next 18 minutes, despite evacuation orders issued 4 days ago. Approximately 200,000 residents chose to remain on the islands, believing their elevated positions offered adequate protection from tsunami effects. They were tragically mistaken about the scale of water displacement that KX-47's impact generated. Waves of this magnitude will overtop Mauna Loa's 4,169-meter summit, transforming the entire Hawaiian archipelago into temporary submarine mountains before the water recedes and reveals whatever remains of human infrastructure and natural ecosystems. The atmospheric disruption has begun manifesting in ways our computer models failed to predict accurately. The impact ejected an estimated 180 billion tons of vaporized material into the stratosphere, nearly double our calculated projections. Satellite imagery shows the debris plume spreading across the Pacific Hemisphere like a malignant shadow that blocks sunlight with efficiency approaching 90%. Within 6 hours, this particulate cloud will begin circling Earth at jet stream velocities, reducing surface illumination to levels comparable to deep twilight even during midday hours. Global temperature drops are already measurable across weather stations that survived the initial impact effects. Monitoring facilities throughout the Pacific Rim report temperature decreases of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius in the past 20 minutes, representing merely the beginning of climate disruption that will persist for years. When the debris cloud achieves complete atmospheric saturation, surface temperatures will plummet below freezing worldwide regardless of season or latitude, triggering immediate agricultural collapse and ecosystem shutdown across every continent. The impact appears to trigger sympathetic seismic events across multiple tectonic plate boundaries in a cascading failure that validates our worst-case scenario predictions. Dr. Elias Trent from the California Geological Survey reported a magnitude 8.9 earthquake along the San Andreas Fault System 6 minutes after KX-47's impact, followed by an 8.4 event along the Cascadia subduction zone. Japan's meteorological agency transmitted reports of unprecedented seismic activity along the entire Pacific Ring of Fire before their communication systems failed due to infrastructure damage rather than any supernatural electromagnetic effects. We are witnessing synchronized tectonic destabilization across the entire Pacific Plate as KX-47's impact has created a feedback loop of seismic energy that could persist for months or years. Every major fault system shows activation signs simultaneously, with stress transfer mechanisms triggering ruptures thousands of kilometers from the original impact site. The concept of isolated regional earthquakes has become obsolete as our planet's crust responds to energy levels that dwarf any natural seismic events in recorded geological history. Volcanic activity along the Ring of Fire has intensified beyond every monitoring threshold established over decades of observation. Mount Fuji shows increased thermal emissions and gas venting that suggest magma chamber activation, while Krakatoa displays seismic signatures consistent with pre-eruption behaviors that preceded its catastrophic 1883 explosion. Dr. Gabriel Holt from the International Volcano Monitoring Network reported that 17 major volcanic systems have elevated their alert status to critical levels within the past hour, representing potential atmospheric consequences that could amplify KX-47's climate effects exponentially. But perhaps most alarming are the reports emerging from deep ocean monitoring stations that survived the initial devastation through automated emergency protocols. Underwater sensors positioned near the impact zone transmitted data for nearly 8 minutes before succumbing to the catastrophic environment their instruments were never designed to endure. Their final readings challenge every assumption we held about standard impact crater formation physics and suggest consequences that extend far beyond conventional geological understanding. The impact crater doesn't conform to natural excavation dynamics that govern typical asteroid strikes. Instead of the circular depression that physics equations predict, sonar mapping reveals a hexagonal cavity measuring 34 kilometers across and 12 kilometers deep. The crater walls exhibit structured formations that suggest organized construction rather than random excavation damage. Most troubling, thermal sensors detected patterned heat emissions from the crater floor, displaying temperature variations that follow systematic sequences rather than the chaotic thermal distribution expected from residual impact heating. Underwater surveillance drones deployed by naval vessels positioned at safe distances from the impact zone have detected debris floating near ground zero that defies classification under any known asteroid composition categories. Video imagery transmitted before drone systems failed shows metallic fragments with surface textures exhibiting cellular patterns that pulse with internal luminescence. Some pieces appear to generate their own electromagnetic fields, cycling through spectral frequencies that suggest active power generation rather than passive mineral reflection of ambient light sources. The most unsettling discovery came from the nuclear submarine Leviathan, which managed to descend 800 meters into the impact crater's outer rim before losing contact with surface command. Their final transmission included sonar imaging of what crew members described as artificial structures embedded within the crater walls, displaying construction characteristics that appeared deliberately engineered rather than naturally excavated. The geometric formations follow mathematical relationships that suggest intentional design principles rather than random impact damage patterns. Social media networks that survived the infrastructure disruption overflow with first-hand accounts from across the Pacific Basin as survivors document the approaching destruction with smartphones and amateur radio equipment. Videos uploaded from Australia show the tsunami approaching as a black wall stretching beyond the horizon, generating its own weather patterns with lightning strikes hitting the water's leading edge. Witnesses describe the sound as comparable to continuous thunder, amplified beyond human tolerance levels, creating acoustic pressure that shatters windows and triggers psychological distress in observers miles from the shoreline. Amateur radio operators worldwide have documented strange transmissions emanating from the impact zone that display characteristics unlike any natural electromagnetic phenomena previously recorded. The signals show mathematical precision and structured information patterns that suggest data compression or encryption protocols operating at technological sophistication levels that exceed current human capabilities. More disturbing, some transmissions appear to be responses, as if something within the crater is actively communicating with external sources, using frequencies and modulation techniques unknown to terrestrial science. Dr. Lucas Ward from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Radio Astronomy Laboratory analyzed several transmission samples before his facility lost power due to regional grid failures. The signal structures display characteristics consistent with compressed information storage and retrieval systems. Whatever is generating these emissions possesses technology far beyond current human understanding and appears to be exchanging data with sources located beyond Earth's immediate vicinity. Military aircraft conducting reconnaissance flights over the impact zone have reported visual anomalies that strain credibility, yet remain consistent across multiple independent observations. Pilots describe organized light patterns emanating from the crater floor that pulse in synchronization with the electromagnetic transmissions detected by ground-based monitoring stations. Several aircraft experienced unexplained electrical system failures when approaching within 50 kilometers of ground zero, forcing emergency landings at bases that remained operational despite widespread infrastructure damage. The evacuation centers established for tsunami refugees report complete chaos as coastal populations flood inland facilities never designed to handle such massive displacement volumes. Transportation networks have collapsed under the weight of population movement that exceeds every logistical planning scenario ever developed for regional emergency response. Communication systems fail systematically as transmission towers succumb to seismic damage, electromagnetic interference from the impact zone, and simple overload from emergency traffic volumes that overwhelm network capacity. Coastal metropolitan areas face complete submersion as waves maintain lethal heights far beyond the dissipation distances that traditional tsunami physics would predict. San Francisco Bay to Los Angeles experiences inundation extending 30 to 50 kilometers inland, while the Japanese coastline faces waves that penetrate mountainous terrain through river valleys and coastal plains. The death toll calculations remain impossible to determine given communication blackouts, but preliminary estimates suggest casualties in the tens of millions across Pacific Rim nations, despite evacuation efforts that represented the largest population movement in human history. Tomorrow's broadcast will detail the full aftermath and the disturbing discoveries emerging from the impact site as humanity grapples with evidence that challenges every assumption about our cosmic neighbors and the true nature of what we assumed was a natural disaster. Dr. Ethan Cross broadcasting from the Deep Mountain Emergency Facility as I document the 72 hours that have reshaped our planet's surface and challenged our understanding of natural disaster recovery. KX-47's impact has created devastation that exceeds every historical comparison. While strange phenomena around the impact crater continue generating controversy about the asteroid's true nature and the toxic environment it has created in the Pacific Basin. The tsunami's destruction surpassed our most catastrophic projections across every affected coastline. Wave heights maintain devastating power far beyond predicted dissipation ranges, striking California at 290 meters, overwhelming Japan with 340-meter walls of water, and completely submerging the Philippines under oceanic fury, reaching 420 meters. The Hawaiian Islands remain completely uninhabitable, with Oahu and Maui showing no land surface above current sea levels. Recovery teams estimate immediate casualties at 53 million people, with another 230 million displaced from coastal zones that may remain flooded for months as ocean levels redistribute. Japan's northeastern prefectures have been essentially erased from the map. Cities like Sendai, Fukushima, and Iwaki no longer exist as recognizable urban centers, reduced to debris fields scattered across hundreds of kilometers of newly formed ocean floor. The Fukushima nuclear facility, despite emergency shutdown procedures, suffered catastrophic structural failure when the tsunami overtopped containment barriers designed for waves 1/10 the actual height. Radioactive contamination now spreads through Pacific currents, adding long-term environmental consequences to the immediate biological hazards created by the impact. California's coastal regions from San Francisco to San Diego experienced complete infrastructure collapse as waves penetrated 30 to 50 kilometers inland through river valleys and coastal plains. Los Angeles International Airport lies beneath 40 meters of seawater mixed with debris from demolished buildings, vehicles, and industrial facilities. The Port of Long Beach, America's second busiest container port, has been completely destroyed, eliminating critical supply chain infrastructure that will take decades to rebuild even under optimal conditions. Global climate disruption has accelerated beyond our most pessimistic modeling scenarios. The debris cloud achieved worldwide atmospheric saturation, reducing solar radiation by 87% and triggering temperature drops that have eliminated growing seasons across all agricultural zones. Snow falls continuously in regions that have never experienced freezing temperatures, while traditional Arctic areas face temperature drops approaching absolute limits for surface life survival. The Amazon rainforest shows widespread dieback as temperatures plummet 40 degrees below normal ranges. Agricultural collapse has begun manifesting in food shortages that threaten global population sustainability. Wheat crops across the American Midwest, Ukrainian steppes, and Australian grain belts have died completely as soil temperatures drop below germination thresholds. Rice paddies throughout Asia freeze solid despite emergency heating attempts, while livestock mortality approaches 90% as feed crops disappear and pasture lands become unusable. Dr. Adrian Voss from the Food and Agriculture Organization estimates current global food reserves might sustain existing populations for approximately 3 months under optimal distribution scenarios. The impact crater itself has become the focus of intense speculation and scientific controversy due to unusual characteristics that some observers interpret as evidence of artificial construction. The hexagonal excavation pattern defies standard impact physics, while thermal readings from the crater floor show organized heat distribution that follows systematic patterns rather than random thermal dissipation. However, leading geologists maintain these anomalies result from unique bedrock composition and underwater volcanic activity triggered by the massive impact energy release. Initial reports of electromagnetic transmissions and structured radio signals from the impact zone have been largely debunked as equipment malfunctions and atmospheric interference caused by the enormous debris cloud. Dr. Caleb Mercer from the Pacific Disaster Response Team clarified that early signal detections resulted from damaged monitoring equipment receiving reflected transmissions from terrestrial sources rather than generating new electromagnetic emissions. The intense atmospheric particulate matter creates radio propagation effects that can make normal communications appear to originate from the crater area. More concerning are the toxic atmospheric conditions that have developed around the impact site, creating a contamination zone extending approximately 50 kilometers from ground zero. Dr. Nathan Cole led the initial assessment mission before his team was forced to evacuate due to severe respiratory distress and neurological symptoms affecting all personnel. Water and air samples reveal complex chemical compounds that don't match standard atmospheric composition, suggesting the asteroid contained trapped gases or exotic materials that were released during impact. The toxic environment has proven lethal to marine life and poses serious health risks to human exposure. Fish found floating dead near the crater display cellular damage consistent with chemical poisoning, while seabirds that flew through the contaminated airspace suffered immediate organ failure. Recovery teams equipped with full environmental protection suits can operate in the zone for only brief periods before equipment degradation forces withdrawal. The source of these toxic compounds remains unclear, with theories ranging from exotic asteroid composition to chemical reactions between vaporized seawater and unusual metallic elements. Some exposure victims have reported hallucinations and altered perception that may explain early claims about artificial structures and alien technology within the crater. Dr. Victor Brandt from the Centers for Disease Control documented cases of individuals experiencing vivid visual and auditory hallucinations after breathing contaminated air for extended periods. These neurological effects include false memories of geometric patterns, structured sounds, and imaginary electromagnetic phenomena that could account for early reports of artificial construction and alien communication attempts. Dr. Julian Pike, treating affected personnel at the emergency medical facility, described the hallucinogenic effects as similar to severe altitude sickness combined with chemical poisoning symptoms. Patients consistently report seeing organized light patterns and hearing mathematical sequences that don't correspond to any actual sensory input detected by monitoring equipment. These shared hallucination patterns suggest the toxic gases contain psychoactive compounds that affect brain chemistry in predictable ways, creating false perceptions that multiple witnesses interpret as external reality. Government agencies have worked aggressively to combat misinformation about alien contact and extraterrestrial technology, emphasizing that all anomalous observations can be explained through conventional environmental science and toxicology. The Department of Defense established information control protocols to prevent panic spreading through social media platforms where conspiracy theories about alien invasion and government cover-ups proliferate faster than official corrections can address them. Military spokespersons stress that unusual crater characteristics result from unique impact dynamics rather than artificial construction. The economic consequences have triggered global financial system collapse as transportation networks fail and communication infrastructure struggles with atmospheric interference. Major stock exchanges suspended trading indefinitely after computer systems proved unable to handle transaction volumes during the mass evacuation period. Currency values fluctuate wildly as governments print unlimited money to fund emergency response operations, while supply chain disruptions create shortages of essential goods including food, medicine, and fuel across all affected regions. Refugee camps housing tsunami survivors face overwhelming logistical challenges as displaced populations exceed every preparation scenario ever developed for natural disasters. Temporary facilities designed for thousands now house hundreds of thousands, creating sanitation crises and disease outbreaks that strain medical resources beyond capacity. Social services have collapsed in regions attempting to absorb evacuee populations, while religious and ethnic tensions escalate as communities compete for diminishing resources and government assistance. The psychological trauma extends far beyond immediate survivors to include global populations facing existential uncertainty about civilization's continuity. Mental health support systems designed for individual counseling cannot address the scale of collective despair affecting billions of people who must rebuild their understanding of humanity's place in an apparently hostile universe. Recovery efforts face obstacles that transcend typical disaster response protocols. Heavy equipment cannot operate effectively in the toxic environment around the impact crater, while atmospheric conditions interfere with satellite communications and aerial reconnaissance flights. The contamination zone may remain inaccessible for months or years until the exotic gases dissipate or neutralize through natural atmospheric processes that remain poorly understood given the unprecedented chemical composition involved. International cooperation has emerged as the only viable approach to managing catastrophe recovery on such a massive scale. Emergency aid shipments flow from unaffected inland regions toward coastal disaster zones, while scientific teams collaborate to understand the long-term environmental consequences of atmospheric debris injection. However, political tensions persist as nations struggle to balance domestic emergency needs against international humanitarian obligations during humanity's greatest crisis. Climate scientists predict the atmospheric debris will require 18 to 36 months to settle sufficiently for partial sunlight restoration, meaning global temperatures will remain below freezing throughout that period. Agricultural recovery cannot begin until growing conditions return, creating a prolonged famine period that will test human social organization and technological capabilities. The next 2 years will determine whether civilization can adapt to radically altered environmental conditions or fragment into competing survival communities. Dr. Dominic Frost from the National Weather Service estimates that even after debris settling begins, global climate patterns will remain disrupted for decades as ocean currents adjust to new temperature distributions and atmospheric circulation adapts to altered heating patterns. The world that emerges from this environmental catastrophe will bear little resemblance to the stable climate conditions that supported human civilization development over the past 10,000 years. This is Dr. Ethan Cross, documenting humanity's struggle to comprehend and survive the consequences of cosmic forces that operate on scales beyond our control or prediction. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as we learn whether our species possesses the resilience necessary to rebuild civilization under fundamentally altered planetary conditions. The familiar world has ended, but whether what emerges represents recovery or permanent decline remains to be determined through our collective response to unprecedented adversity.